started doing with John, I found out some people like Ursula Powell, a Holocaust survivor, and she wanted to find her diary, so we found it for her down in the Holocaust Museum, and it took a couple of months, like 6 months, but we were able to reunite her with a diary that she had written during the concentration camps, and it was just amazing. Wow. And unfortunately, we lost Ursula this year, and it's so sad, but I videotaped everything, and I was able to get permission to go down to the Holocaust Museum in Washington and videotape Ursula, because she was so good in the presentation at the World War II Book Club, that we videotaped her for all 4 floors of the Holocaust Museum before it was even opened. So, and then we got to go down to a special area where they showed where all the items go, get assessed and get prepared, and so that gave her great confidence. But I was able to get her on video, her going through her personal documents, and now her sons, who obviously weren't with us, both doctors, they're able to look at that video and hear her words. And that's really that's what it's all about. History to me is not repeating things that happened. It's telling about the stories, it's telling about the characters, it's telling about their the challenges and the obstacles that they overcame. And what did it take? It's not about just successes, it's about achievements. And we need people now, especially now. I have 2 sons in the military, one an Army Ranger, one going into the Air Force, 2 out of 2. So this is personal now, is that we need to have people in leadership positions that have the guts, that have the brains, that know how to lead in the proper way. And we're missing that. And I think the link, after what I've read and met with all these different people, I think the link is to find the people, link the new generation, and take them away from the phones so that when you just see the back of their phones, is that get them connected to history, because it is interesting. And I took my 2 sons to the last meeting that we had, the Veterans Night, and they loved it. They loved it. So kids love it if we present it in the right way. So the Patton Foundation heard about my work with Ursula, and they contacted me, and I told them about how I followed Dr. Lamazo, Steve, up to the FDR Hyde Park, and I followed him, and I videotaped him, because you gotta find the people that know the real truth and the stories and kind of tell it in a story. And so they heard about that and watched that video, and so they asked me to write a proposal to say, well, what would you do? You know, to kind of educate, you know, how would you be part of General Patton Foundation? And I really didn't know anything about him. So what I did was I found out from watching it, and I told Helen Patton, the granddaughter, I said, I'm not that interested, I am interested, obviously, in his achievements, but I care more about how did he think? Who influenced how did he think? That's the key. And I found out about Fox Connor about that. Fox Connor, General, he influenced General Patton, Eisenhower, and George Marshall. He was their mentor. A lot of people don't even know about him. So I found out all these different things, and I told her, I said, what I would like to do is start a Patton Projects. So it's a living, breathing thing that involves children and all different generations together, almost like that puzzle on your kitchen table that everybody kind of comes back to, and start doing programs that are going to get people interested. So I have a whole bunch of ideas. Talked to a number of the group tonight about them. I had great feedback so far. I'm going to be asking you for assistance, and I'm going to have a small group of advisors and things like that, but I have a lot of exciting things ahead. And my position doesn't really start until February, but I told them I want to start it now. Well, actually, I already started, I said, as soon as I started talking about this. And I said, there's 2 gentlemen that we have to start finding, like Patton did. He wanted people who were trying to do the right thing for service and helping other people. He wanted to get them the recognition they deserve. So the Patton Foundation has Patton Publishing, came out with an award-winning book called The Portraits of Service, and it just came out, and I said, I want 2 of those copies, they're beautiful, and I want to present it to the 2 people that I think are going to continue on the Patton mission. And so I want to ask Dr. John McLaughlin up and Dr. Schonberg. And I made my own paper. The paper here that I have on the books is actually all photographs of the book club events that we had.
Oh, how nice.
And the book is called Portraits of Service, and you're both going to get a personal letter from Helen Patton about the importance of the work that you have done and continue to do. She's going to be in Massachusetts.
Bravo. You can throw them up and hold them up.
Oh, gosh, no.
Clean up the mess.
Oh, no.
Read the name. Yeah, John Land.
John Lanza. Oh, there you go, John.
It's an interesting book on a timely topic, the Fuhrer bunker. So hopefully you'll gain a few bits of information. Just what everybody wants to read. Lucky day.
Very nice.
When you were younger.
Ready?
You're gonna start your dance first?
Good to see that Private McLaughlin and Private Schonberg got demoted a little bit again.
He was a colonel when you walked.
I know he was a colonel. I have a right to change marks at any time, or ranks.
He's gonna get executed.
Yeah, I know, yeah. I did most of the technical work on this. No, just kidding. Rich and I have been going to Berlin, well, we went a couple times. I happened to go years ago when the Berlin Wall was up, and I mentioned it to Rich, Dr. Schonberg, and he liked the idea. We went a couple years ago, and then we followed it up, got interested in certain areas there. So I'll let him go over our program tonight. We'll keep it moving, and if you have any questions afterwards, we'll be glad to answer them. All right.
So we'll start with a map of Berlin, and is that focus clear enough? Excuse me for 1 second.
No, thank you.
This is a map from the 1940s of Berlin, and there's a few key areas. Most of the buildings we're talking about have relevance to military history that occurred in Berlin. And the geographic area was in the center of Berlin called Berlin Mitte. And we have two people from Berlin we mentioned, Dr. Blumenthal and his wife Marianne, right? Correct? Are they here? There we go, everybody. So they will fill in any time. Feel free to add to what we're saying. And there's a few things I'm going to point out. There's what was called the Tiergarten, which was a park, and then a street here which had changed names at different times. During the war, it was named the Herrengorenstrasse. Main Street was the Unter den Linden, and at that, between the junction of the park and the Unter den Linden was the Brandenburg Gate, or the Brandenburg Tor. So to get an orientation of some of the buildings that we're talking about, the Tor is here, the Unter den Linden, and right off this area, you had the Reichstag over here. You had the this area right in front of the, or in back of the gate, depending on which way you want to look at it, was called the Pariser Platz, and you had the French embassy, and the British embassy, and eventually the American embassy, though it was never really used in this area, which we maybe mention later. And then down the street called the Wilhelmstrasse, you had where the Reichschancellery was off the Vossstrasse. So most things of any importance occurred in this basic area. A little further down the road, on Prince Albertstrasse, you had the Gestapo headquarters, which was also the head of the SD and the RSHA, and basically it was the Secret Service. So everything is pretty much geographically here, here, and other spots. So when the military came in, I'll link to this in a second, otherwise I'll just advance it that way.
Need help?
Technology, hang on.
John and I will be right up.
I'll have to leave this way. Again, in 1945, the U.S. Military commissioned a map, and they put down all the key structures that they thought were of military importance. But most of the ones we're talking about, some of them I've circled. Let me just turn this off and turn it on. This area here was called the Bendler Block, and it was important because the head of the military command was located there. And in this area, later during the war in 1944, was where Stauffenberg had been executed in the courtyard of the OKW, the Oberkommando of the Wehrmacht. And then down here you have, where's the Princeton's Run, somewhere around here, Gestapo headquarters. You have the Reichschancellery, and you have various administrative buildings. Up here you had the Brandenburg Gate, the Unter den Linden again, and this was the Adlon Hotel, which was a very popular hotel. Miller, you want to take it from there?
Well, yeah, some of the things that happened, I think that the Russians would know nothing left of the Nazi regime. So some of the buildings that probably could have stayed for people to look through historically, the bunker, some of the parts of the area that were completely destroyed by bombing, could have still been interested for people to go through. But because of the feeling of that the Nazis, some sympathizers might come back, kind of everything in that block going from 11 right up here down was destroyed.
And to show you a little bit of the architecture, the old Berlin had magnificent architecture. And miraculously on this one street you see 3 or 4 buildings that survived the destruction. And the destruction was pretty complete, and you will see pictures of that too. Contrasted to the old architecture, the Nazi architecture was basically concrete. Hitler, like the Romans, he thought they used concrete. It lasted thousands of years, so we'll use concrete because we are going to create the 1,000-year Reich. So most Nazi buildings were just concrete structures, whether it's the new Reichschancellery right here, with the balcony added by Albert Speer later, the Tempelhof Airport, another view of the Reichschancellery. This one is, and the Reichschancellery was sort of L-shaped, so part of it was on the Wilhelmstrasse, and then the bulk of it was on the Vostrasse. This is Air Ministry, the Luftwaffe headquarters, and this is the Bendler Block, the OKW. And this is modern Germany. It just, the contrast is amazing. Berlin is a vibrant city, and the amount of reinvigorating and the amount of building is just phenomenal. It's going on all the time. The old city looks nothing like the new city. So here's a picture down the Unter den Linden Main Street. This is the Brandenburg Gate. This area of the 4 Horses is called the Quadriga. And you'll see a few other structures. This would be the Adlon Hotel. This was called the Blücher Palace, later bought in 1930 by the U.S. government for the purpose of putting the U.S. Embassy there. The problem is there was some turmoil, there was financial problems in the U.S., and they never actually used this for the U.S. ambassador. He had created, and if any of you have read in the Garden of the Beast, they talk about Ambassador Dodd and his spot on the Bendlerstrasse, on the corner of the Bendlerstrasse was U.S. And you'll note in this picture, look how small the trees are. They're just planted. Contrast that to, this is Berlin in 1940s, before obviously the bombings. This would be the French Embassy. This is the Adlon Hotel. This would be the U.S. Embassy. And this building here was the home of the artist Max Liebermann. Max Liebermann was a prominent German painter who died right before the Nazis really gained the power that they had, but he saw enough. He died in 1935, and he was disgusted with them. So by 1933, with the laws changing, he used to be head of the Prussian Academy of Arts, and he resigned because of the fact that they were no longer allowed Jewish artists.
You have the cathedral in the back on the left, and the palace on the right, which is now no longer there. We built a couple times, but they never got to it. So the cathedral on the left is still there. That's where Hermann Göring was married, and you still can go into that. It's quite an inner place to see.
And that's Berlin, right, some months after the war, actually. You can see the amount of devastation.
And here's the Adlon, which was used by all the correspondents. A famous hotel, I mean, just over and over, one of the more famous. Great wine cellar. The Russians came in, and apparently the hotel could have been saved, and it started a fire in the wine cellar or whatever and was destroyed. And they've rebuilt it today, somewhat similar, obviously a modern place, but certainly...
You'll see the comparison in a second. And again, another view of the destruction, this one a little more recent than the other view, and this one even more.
Look at the bullet holes in the...
Now this is the Berlin Wall, so it's taken sometime in the 60s. And you can see how all the destroyed buildings have been cleared out. It's basically looking like a ghost town, except for, now this is all, in back of the Brandenburg Gate, this is all now East Berlin. Everything here is East Berlin. And all these buildings were built under the communist rule. They all look alike. They're all, meant for the workers. But one building, well, it really doesn't stand out, but it stands out. This building right here was unscathed by the bombing, and it was the Ministry of Transport. So you'll see this building in some other views taken right after Berlin was bombed, and the pictures will show the Fuhrer bunker and things like that.
And you can see it, the art center on the left is still there. You see the corner of it right there? And if you look back into here, open land, what you'll see now, obviously, is so different. But the Hitler bunker would have been right back.
Right about here,
yeah.
Somewhere
and,
in here.
This area was just, over the years, just cut down, moved, things moved, and they cut down again and moved it. And now the streets are going through here, and occupation by a lot of things, which you'll see later.
So to get a sense of orientation, running north-south was the Wilhelmstrasse, running east-west was the Vossstrasse. The bulk of the chancery, the new chancery, went east-west, and a little part of it was on the north-south axis. When you travel through Berlin, central Berlin anyway, there are a lot of buildings that show the pockmarks of war. I don't recall all these buildings. This is part of the Brandenburg Gate, and if you go closely and look at it, they did a remarkable job of covering the holes, but it is just filled with scars, bullet holes, larger bombardment than that. Same with this building, which was right near the Dom, near the palace, not the palace.
Ministry.
Yeah, Ministry, and other buildings, so there's a lot of that. And this is the Brandenburg Gate today. I had to go at 7 in the morning because it's usually filled with tourists, so got a nice view of it.
Interesting, because Napoleon went through here, and just the whole, just a significant area, that tour, that's great.
Now, as you look through, way in the distance is the Victory Column. That was originally near the Reichstag, but Hitler had moved down it was called the Charlotten Strasse, now called the Strasse de Juni 17. All right. And the Reichstag would be somewhere in this direction. In fact, you could probably see a corner of it right here. That building here would be where the German parliament was, the Reichstag. And these are modern views. These are during the day and during the night of the Brandenburg Gate, and then again, in the distance, not too far away, was the Reichstag. And the Reichstag dome was burned supposedly by a communist, a Dutch communist, which really launched the ability for Hitler to take control and really change politics. Because of the burning of the Reichstag, Hitler gained control. At any rate, they rebuilt it. After the war, it was devastated. They rebuilt a modern one, and it's showing. You can see the lights on. It's really a remarkable building. You can travel through it, which I think we have other pictures of later. And here's the Avalon Hotel in the 40s, 30s, late 30s, 40s, and recall that this building was leveled and destroyed and rebuilt, and they did a pretty remarkable job trying to capture the essence of the old hotel. And this was the Bugliari Palace where the U.S. Embassy would have been, again, right near the Brandenburg Gate. The Brandenburg Gate would be caddy perpendicular to this. After the war, you can see how little of it all remained. And this is the embassy today, rebuilt, modernized. This is the Air Ministry. The Wilhelmstrasse goes up and down, about a block up. You would have come to the Reichschancellery. So down the Wilhelmstrasse, where the soldiers are marching, is the Reichsministry, which is a huge building. I'll show you an aerial view. And you'll notice the eagle and swastika. The building is still intact today. It's very much the way you see it here as here, except they took down the eagle and swastika, which would have been this spot right here. You can tell Apple they have to work on those. So this is the Reichsministry. It goes all these blocks. Where we were talking about, the pictures I just showed you were taken about in this area here. There was a fence, there were these pillars, it goes inside, but you can see it's a huge, huge building. And right over here was where, this is Prince Albertstrasse, the Gestapo headquarters were right about where I'm flashing the pointer, which is this building, and then after the war. And you can barely see it in this picture, but there was a museum on right next door to the Gestapo headquarters, which survived and exists today. This is the museum, and you'll see in a later picture what it looks like today. This is the Gestapo headquarters. It was leveled. In its place now is a monument, an exhibit hall, if you will, called the Topography of Terror. And it chronicles the rise and the history of National Socialism. The Air Ministry is right here on the bottom. And this is a present day view. That's that museum I told you about. This is the Topography of Terror. You can see a sign here saying Topography of Terror. It says Wilhelmstrasse. This is the Air Ministry. And this is the Berlin Wall. So everything on this side was East Germany, and this is West Germany. Right across, right down the block from Gestapo headquarters was a train station, the Anhalter train station. And the only remnants are this reminder, the segment of the building was left as a memorial testimony. And you can see the archway, the relief. And now we're going to go back to the Unter den Linden. We're looking down the street. The Brandenburg Gate would be somewhere to the left. And this is Humboldt University. Back then it was King Frederick University, I believe, something on that name. And this is where the book burning occurred. Actually, across the street is the other part of the university, right here. We'll come back to that in a minute. So down the street, you see the dome that Miller talked about, and there was a memorial to the fallen soldier right here. This is Humboldt University again, and this is where the book burning occurred. So this shot is taken from behind this pillar here, looking down into the courtyard of the university. So on May 10th, 1933, all literature that was considered unsuitable for the German public, mainly Jewish literature, was burned. This is the Dom Miller mentioned, and Goering was married here. It was a big to-do. And then one of the things I love about Miller is he takes me to these places that are off the beaten path, let's put it that way. So Adolf Hitler had a brother, stepbrother, and that half-brother had a restaurant, cafe, that he capitalized on the name Hitler, and it was located on Wittenberg Platz, number 3. And the restaurant survived part of the bombing, and for a while it was called Café Moula, but that went out of business. And very recently it was being re-renovated by different owners. So when I went to take this picture, I was chased out because I was told I wasn't allowed to take a picture of the building. I have no idea why. He clicked his heels and said, "Get out." I said, "Okay." But I got my picture. A little bit away from the center of Berlin was an area called, what's it called, Charlottenburg? Not Charlottenburg. The Fürstendamm area. Right. And Eichmann, who is in charge of Department 4B4, the Gestapo, well, the secret police, the whole SD, the whole RSHA underwent a couple of renovation, they reorganized multiple times. And during the last reorganization, they created 4 departments. Department 4 was dealing with Jewish affairs. And his Department 4B4 was a particular aspect of dealing with Jewish affairs, namely getting them off to the concentration camps and arranging the trains and the logistics of how to make that possible. The building has been totally demolished, and the only recognition of that event and that place is on a bus stop right adjacent to where the building was. Now it's a hotel. So at least they're doing that. Fegelein, SS Gruppenführer Hermann Fegelein, was married to Eva Braun, I should say Eva Hitler, because she was married. Most of you recall Eva Braun married Hitler the night before they committed suicide on April 29, 1945. And Eva Braun's sister Gretel married this Hermann Fegelein, who, with many other generals, always had mistresses. And when the war looked like it was imminently over, he decided he was going to leave, and so he was in his apartment with his mistress. And there's some evidence that that mistress may have been a spy, but I'll leave that for another story. At any rate, he was with the mistress, and when Hermann Göring tried to, Heinrich Himmler tried to negotiate a peace on his own with Count Bernadotte of Sweden, Hitler found out about it and then said Fegelein, who was Himmler's adjutant at the Reichschancellery, who was accessible to Hitler and accessible to Himmler, and was more accessible to Hitler, Hitler had him found and executed. So we went to the apartment where he was dragged out of his apartment, and again, depending on whose account you read, because history is full of discrepancies, he was either tried or he wasn't. He was either shot on the spot or he was dragged to the Reichschancellery and shot in the Ehrencourt, which is this big area, open area. Depending on whose account you read, there's variations. Want to take orchards?
Oh, yeah. This was Hermann Göring's favorite restaurant. Interesting thing about it, when the war got tight, Goebbels wanted to close it down. And so what happened was that Göring then tried to make it a Luftwaffe headquarters for officers. That didn't work. So they went back and forth about it. But that was the favorite spot for a lot of Germans and for Hermann Göring. And what was interesting is Horcher, the man who ran it, decided that things were getting too tight, and he went to Madrid. And there's still a Horcher's restaurant in Madrid run by the children, grandchildren of the original Horcher. And this was bombed. Got an old postcard of what it was like, but this is back as a place, and this used to be the place when you see one of the more popular places for outdoor eating in Germany. And so they had the Kranzlers, and then on the bottom, which is still there, but it's a lot different, obviously, because the place was leveled. But down on the bottom, in the old days, was where all the Germans would go on the Fürstendamm for coffee or drinks or whatever.
Right off the Tiergartenstrasse, that park, was a building, an old building, that was taken over. It was actually owned by the Lieberman family. And the people who took it over, two prominent Nazis, one named Philip Buller and the other one Karl Brandt. Karl Brandt was one of many of Hitler's doctors, and Philip Buller was in charge of the Reichschancellor, as chief of the Reichschancellor. For whatever reason, they were put in charge of the euthanasia program, which basically was called Action T4. T4 because the address was Tiergartenstrasse 4. What they decided was anybody who was infirmed, who was handicapped or challenged by today's words, mentally challenged, was a drain on the resources of the German economy and therefore should be put to death. So people who had epilepsy, people who were crippled, people who were, mentally retarded. And when word got out, it was kept secret, and at first they were using methods like injecting, but it wasn't efficient enough, so they actually developed using gas vans and brought in gas vans and stepped up the execution of people, which then those same people that designed that process then went on to carry that to the concentration camps, and then they discovered that carbon monoxide was still too slow and took too long, and they happened upon Zyklon B, which was used as a fumigant to kill lice and other things in the First World War, and then modified slightly to kill people. So, I'll just go back for a second. That whole building was knocked down, and there's this memorial to T4 there now. And this is an interesting place, Madame Kitty's. This whole building was built by the Gestapo because Heydrich, who was head of that aspect of the secret police, recruited spies, beautiful young women from all over Europe, and turned them into prostitutes, with the building being built totally bugged from every room, floor to ceiling, so they could record every sound, which apparently provided a lot of amusement for the people listening to the recordings. But they gleaned about 4,000 tapes that mysteriously disappeared after the war, for whatever reason. At any rate, the building still exists. It's been modified to be housing for people. This is the view of the Reichstag after the war. This was the dome that had been redone circularly. The Russians, when they came in, and the Russians were the first people, the first soldiers to enter Berlin, and in the Battle of Berlin, and they carved their names, and part of the Reichstag still has the names that the soldiers left. Most of it's been renovated and redone. This is the Reichstag today, the dome again in the back. You can take tours. This is the Reichstag at night. It's one of many well illuminated and pretty pictures. This is the dome we talked about. You can get a great view of the city by taking the spiral up. And again, you see, as you're walking, you get different views around the city. This is the Bender block where the head of the Army Command was located. Through this courtyard, through this same entrance was the courtyard where von Stauffenberg was assassinated or shot. And here we're inside the courtyard now. There's a wreath, which we'll see in another picture. But this picture is interesting because the view you're looking at is this view right here. This doorway is this doorway. Or rather, this doorway is that doorway, the window, etc. And this is the memorial. This is the spot where von Stauffenberg, as well as a few other of the generals, were killed. There were 4 other people shot there at that spot.
Always interesting in history if that had worked.
Oh, you want to go on?
No, I was just saying it would have been very interesting because
If the bomb.
you see all the movie that just came, that was out about it, and all of the History Channel things about the assassination attempt and what would have happened as far as what would have happened to Germany, what would have happened in the war.
One of the popular places was called the Esplanade Hotel. Miller and I were looking for this for a year, and it took my son to take me out one night, and it was staring in our face. This is on a street that goes off the Tiergartenstrasse. It's called the Bellevue Strasse. And the Esplanade was popular because, take it, Miller.
Well, it was just one of the, I guess the Kaiserhof and the Adlon were the 2 and the Hotel Bristol maybe. But this was one of the more popular hotels, and that's where Ambassador Dodd first came. And it was, you know, where a lot of Americans stayed that weren't in the, either the reporting kind of things. And famous hotel, and they saved part of it, which you'll see in the next slide, because it was just well known. There's the modern Esplanade, and underneath you can see they saved some of the old parts, which is very interesting.
When you get close, you see how bullet ridden and just blasted this part of the structure is. And around the corner, well, let's see, I think we may have it, is another part. We're actually, this is the outside wall today, but it was the inside wall of this dining room of the hotel. So they left it as something that you can see. It's behind plexiglass, as is the part of the old hotel that they left behind plexiglass. And right in back, so if we're looking up this way, there's a whole huge modern center called the Sony Center. And then this is maybe, I don't know, 20 stories high, 15 stories, it's, you know, 10 stories high, it's huge. And it's all open and it's all around the corner from that location. Tempelhof Airport. Up here you see an eagle. The head of that eagle was removed and it was returned in the 50s, I guess, sometime in the 50s. So, whatever. And Tempelhof was the largest airport in the world at the time, and it is gargantuan. And this street, there's a section, I think they call it Eagle Alley. There were these huge eagles with swastikas, obviously now removed, throughout the whole complex. You can see one here. There was one basically on every corner. And we had the ability to see the Olympic Stadium, which is not too far outside Berlin. You'll see the actual pillars today. This is today, and this is today, are not any different than they were then, except the swastika, and a circular swastika. The Nazis used what were called runes, and they were a type of writing supposedly from, I don't know, a mythic type of writing. But anyway, this is called the Sonnenrad. It's one of the many runes, and the Nazis embraced it. Here we're inside Olympic Village. This building was the used as the center where they would eat. It's in total disrepair because this area, was this in East Berlin then?
No, it's West Berlin.
It's West Berlin. I'm not sure why it's in such disrepair, but at any rate, they did preserve one building. They preserved the American building. This is where the American athletes were. Here we're looking at Jesse Owens' room. This was our guide in Berlin, Peter Hill, who has an interesting history. His father fought and was a POW in the Luftwaffe. And then an interesting spot about 30 miles, a little more, south of Berlin, were two complexes, actually three complexes, called Maybach 1, Maybach 2, and Zeppelin. Maybach 1 and Maybach 2 were these houses, well, they look like houses. They were designed to thwart bombardment. Any airplane would think they were just cottages, and they were made to look like cottages, but actually they're these huge concrete reinforced bunkers, which when the Russians came through, and here you can see how it looks like a little cottage, but actually you've got 3-foot wall, 3-foot thickness of walls. And when the Russians finally advanced and were taking over, they decided to blow it all up, but they couldn't. So they tried 3 different times to blow it up, and finally the ground under it gave way and the buildings collapsed, but they couldn't blow them up. And ironically, after this area became part of East Germany, they wished they hadn't blown them up because they used it for, or they wanted to use it then for intelligence work. These are called Maybach. There was another section, Maybach. These all had, each different building dealt with a different area of the world and part of the war. The underground center had communications to all of Europe, all the places that the Germans had communications. And when the Nazis left and the Russians came in, there weren't any Nazis apparently to say, the Russians are in control of our old communications center. And for reasons I don't understand, the Russians were able to use about 1,000 women and monitor 1 million calls that were coming through the center. It still existed. And so they had an unbelievable ability to eavesdrop on Allied and post-war, Cold War communications. Throughout Germany, but mainly in this area, there were these interesting little silos or protection on different scales. This one is maybe 8 feet tall, this one's about 30 or 40 feet tall. And if you were out in the open and an air raid were happened to occur, if you couldn't get into a bunker, you had these little bunkers where you could try and get in and close the door and be protected. And this is a map of the old Germany. I'm going to keep this short, fly through the next section, which was on the bunker. So I'll just show you a map. This is the way the street looked in 1938. The Nazis took over and you know, made them offers they couldn't refuse, so they left. And they built the new Reichschancery. The Reichschancery extends down here across. So part of the old Reichschancery was where they built the Führerbunker, which, I don't know if these show that. Does this show any of that? This just shows the buildings. I'll show you in another map where the Führerbunker would be. But the thing to keep in mind is the Führerbunker extended out this way. It ran east-west. This is north-south. Okay, these are parts of the bunker, parts of the Reichschancery. This part, called the Hall of Mosaics, was filled with red marble, which was later used by the Russians as part of their monuments. They took all the marble out and built a few monuments, one in Treptow, which I'll show you a picture of. The underground network, the whole bunker system was connected. So they're not just the Führer bunker and the Four bunker, but there were other bunkers all throughout the area. And Germany had a massive underground area. This is the new Reichschancery along the Vostrasse. This is the renovated old Reichschancery on the Wilhelmstrasse, and the balcony, as I mentioned, built by Speer. These doors would open up and cars could drive in to the what was called the Ehrencourt, and then people would have to walk. And it was designed to intimidate. So cars could come in here, people would then have to walk through the Ehrencourt, through the Rotundum, to get to Hitler's office, which was somewhere here. And the building, I'll again go through this. When the Reichschancery was being renovated, the original bunker was called the Four bunker, and it was meant as an air raid station. So you can see it was built under what would be later a building. So it was disguised. This structure, I think it was used as a dining hall or a festive hall, hid the Four bunker. Then in '43, Hitler realized he needed, with the bombings going on in Berlin, he needed a stronger bunker. So he had it was called the Tief bunker, but we know it as the Führer bunker built. And so the area was cleared out. The Four bunker is here. It runs this way. This would be the Wilhelmstrasse, the Vostrasse this way. And the walls were 3 meters thick and 9 feet thick. Orientation. The rooms themselves were tiny. They were 10 by 10. So if you could live in a 10 by 10 room for months, you have to have a special temperament, I think. It's very claustrophobic. In this view, this is a square building, which you'll see right here. This is an exit. This was called an observation tower or an air tower, depending on who you want to listen to. And again, some people say this was never used as an observation tower, but yet the Russians have testimony of a person that was in the observation tower who testified he saw the bodies being taken out when Hitler committed suicide in this area and burned. So this is the corner of the Reichschancery. There was an existing old palace called the Borsig Palace. Albert Speer gutted it, remodeled it, left the outside of it to just blend, for whatever reason, with the renovations that he underwent. And you'll see the area was also redesigned with the Wilhelmplatz, which was a Platz is a square, if you will, where people can gather, and it's like a park. And here's some statues in it that had prominence. This is today now. We're looking away from the Reichschancellery. This is part of the Air Ministry building. The Kaiserhof Hotel, which was where Hitler stayed originally, was in this area.
Guy looks lost.
The Mohlenstrasse, and right here, this would have been the Reichschancellery, this, right on this corner. This is the Vostrasse coming down here. And this brown building was that building I showed you very early on, where I said there was one remaining building with the Russian buildings in the background when we looked at the devastation. You see another view of that. This is an aerial view. This is the Wilhelmplatz. This was called the Zeitenplatz. The Kaiserhof would have been here. This is the Ministry of Propaganda. And that's what it looked like after the war. Goebbels had a villa in the property near the Reichschancellery. Hitler's driver, Erich Kempka, had they called it a house right next to the bunker itself. And again, the devastation. There's a story with the globe. And you can see after the war, and then once they, again after the war, this crater was supposedly where they found Adolf Hitler. And one of the things that in May we have speaking, a gentleman, the chief archaeologist from Connecticut, who was invited to Russia to investigate the skull, the fragment that they have of Adolf Hitler. And he'll be talking about that, and I won't be giving it away to say. They found out not only was it not Adolf Hitler, but it's a woman to be determined. In this garden, the Reichschancellery, when the Russians first came in, Adolf Hitler killed himself on April 30th, 1945. By May 1st, the Russians came in. And May 2nd, they came in looking for Hitler. There was over 160 bodies scattered throughout the Reichschancellery garden. And they weren't sure where Hitler was. The first people thought he was in the bunker, logical choice. But a Russian found a man and a woman and a German shepherd in a crater, and that became the evidence part of the evidence that they found Hitler. This is the same building I talked about. Here it is again after the war. They're starting to clear out the bunkers. Here's the building in the block before the war. And another view of the devastation. This would be that blockhouse that we talked about, the conical tower. So you get a sense of how destroyed. On the internet, if you're not careful, you'll see pictures like this, where some people think this is an actual photo. And what happened was the Russians made a movie of the event a couple years after. They controlled the whole ground. Nobody was allowed near the Fuhrer bunker for years, and they remade a movie for Stalin. You can see everything's cleared out, and this is probably taken in the 60s, would you say? All the destroyed buildings are gone. This is showing you what was mapped out where buildings are going to be, maybe even earlier. The Brandenburg Gate is here. This is the Unter den Linden.
It's like a new city.
Yeah, it was a ghost city when they cleared it out. This is Miller showing some of the pictures. In these apartment buildings, right in front, which you can't see down, is where the old Fuhrer bunker would have been. And again, today's view, this is about where the Fuhrer bunker would be. And unfortunately, and we had two guides who got this wrong, which is amazing because they're German, they should know better. But unfortunately, when they put this map up of the Fuhrer bunker, they're showing it run in a north-south direction, which makes everybody think that exit building, that watchtower and that square block were over here, when in fact it runs east-west. So actually the bunker runs this way, not this way. And there's an Italian gentleman by the name of Mr. Guido, that's his name, who wrote a book and did a lot of research on this and conclusively proved through the use of magnetic imaging where all the metal fragments were, and they could find out the actual spot of the bunker. This is the train station right near the Reichschancellery called the Mohlenstrasse. This red marble was supposedly used in Hitler's Reichschancellery, as well as the red marble here. This is in Treptow. And right in the gardens of the Reichschancellery, the Holocaust Memorial, or the Memorial to Victims Fallen, was built.
Remember that early slide we showed with that whole empty area that's now filled with part of this, with the Holocaust?
And what's interesting to me, the architect for this was a U.S. architect named Peter Eisenman, who went to Columbia High School in Maplewood.
No.
Columbia High School.
I told you.
Columbia.
Minor school, but it's okay.
All right. And then this is a view. This would have been the block of the Reichschancellery, so we'll get a modern day view. You can see the modern architecture. Everything is like it wasn't. The Reichschancellery, and I'll just show you. I'll show you. You know, there's a lot of information, and I do a lot of research on the internet. And one of the fun things is finding out what is of usefulness and what isn't. And media is media. And there's a show on television now called Hunting Hitler, and it's full of mistakes. But media sells media. They want you to watch a show. So it should be called Hunting Nazis, but they're trying to get a wider audience. And, you know, they learned that from the newspaper. So one of my favorite newspapers was Charlie Manson is the evil. I mean, evil begets evil. What can you say? All right. So we'll end it with that. Are there any questions, or anybody have anything they want to add?
Great job you did.
We had a fun time touring all this. And that was just a fraction, but I didn't want to get too long-winded because I told my wife to give me a signal. Which after the second slide, she was giving me a signal.
Very good.
All right.
Thank you, guys.
Richard, question.
Yes.
What evidence in Berlin is there today of the Nazis and the Nazi war leaders?
What evidence?
I mean,
Repeat the
have
question.
they all been wiped clean?
What's the
Pictures,
question?
statues?
Yeah, well, there's certain monuments. I showed you the Tiergartens for. There's not much indicating the presence of Nazis in Germany. They have a few memorials that they didn't destroy that they left up, but they're far and few between. Munich is the same way. I was amazed when Miller and I went to Munich. The building called the Führerbüro, where the Munich Accord was signed in 1938. Mussolini, Daladier from France, Chamberlain from England. They all were in Hitler's office well, now it's a music school. And the only sign in front of the building is a sign saying music school. So I think Germany is caught between trying to erase the past and get forward, but still having to acknowledge some of it. And I think more and more some of the old monuments are being knocked down. I think in Nuremberg, Hitler's favorite hotel, the Deutscherhof, we learned was being knocked down, and there's all kinds of cries that the Germans are slowly, little by little, eliminating that kind of history.
Should see that maybe they came out labyrinth of lies.
Any other comments or questions? Anybody want to?
Thank you, you did an excellent
Outstanding.
job.
It's nice of the book club to send Miller and I on our next trip.
To Hawaii.
Hawaii.
To Jersey City.